Welcome, everyone. Really such a distinct pleasure to have everybody here today. It's so chilly out there. Welcome. If you don't know where you are, you're in Ellen K. Levy's studio. And Ellen and I have been running the New York LASER program together for, I think, 14 years. So this is quite a run.
Yeah.
And we, we host these New York LASER talks on behalf of Leonardo ISAST, the International Society for the Arts, Science, and Technology. And there's a third Nina. There's three Ninas here. No, my graduate student wanted to meet Nina. It's like, there's three Ninas, you get to pick which one. So for those of you who don't know, the LASER program is international. I believe there are almost 60 gathering sites around the world, including Cyland. So today's event is a special joint session with Cyland LASER, which is run by M.F.A and Natalia Kolodzei. And so today we have a special kind of thematic, or part of our session will be thematic. It will be looking at feminism, recent projects, and the building of multicultural communities by way of media art festivals. So there's a lot of grist for our lively minds. If you are here for the first time, raise your hand, please. Oh, super, lots of first timers, or a few first timers. So we will have a sign-in sheet by the front door. Please be sure. It's there now. We have a sign-in sheet right now. You can run over right now, put your name down and your email address. We will add you to our email blast list. We tend to host these events probably post-COVID, maybe 5-6 times a year if we're lucky. So keep your eyes peeled, but you can go online, look at New York LASER talks, and you can see which talks are happening in different parts of the world if you happen to be traveling. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we have 4 incredible speakers today. We have Judith Kapstein Brodsky, we have Lisa Cartwright, we have Anna Frants and Natalia Kolodzei, all who will be speaking. And then at the end of the presentations, we will have an open Q&A session and discussion. So welcome, we're thrilled to have you here. And Ellen, I'm sure you have a few things to say.
Yeah, it's really great to see all of you. Bear in mind that this is especially unusual LASER because it's a collaborative one with Cyland. This is the first collaboration we've done, and we're really quite excited. And as Patricia said, just so you know, the garbage is off the side. It's sort of labeled where plastics go, drinks, drink cups, and things like that. And the bathroom is in the back. Our first speaker today is Judith Brodsky, who has had incredible visibility in 2 wonderful shows that are, I think they're still on, right? At Rutgers. And I'm sure she will provide information for those who would like to drive and see it or take public transportation. It's not so far, and the shows are really magnificent. Judith Kapstein Brodsky is an American artist, curator, educator, and author known for her contributions to feminist discourse in the arts. She received her BA from Harvard University and an M.F.A. from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. She's a Professor Emerita in the Department of Visual Arts, Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers State University of New Jersey. Judith is the founding director of the Rutgers Center for Innovative Print and Paper, which was renamed the Brodsky Center in 2006. And I think, judging from the responses we received, almost everybody here is familiar with this. That same year, 2006, She was also co-founder with Ferris Olin of the Center for Women in the Arts and Humanities at Rutgers University. She's the past national president of ArtTable, the College Art Association, and the Women's Caucus for Art. Today she will discuss her book, Dismantling the Patriarchy Bit by Bit, Art, Feminism, and Digital Technology, that was published by Bloomsbury, but also certainly talk about her relationship to feminism and the program and content of the book. Judith.
Thank you so much. So what you're looking at is a photograph of the studio that was at Rutgers, and the print center is now at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and is continuing the mission. It's interesting because I was just talking about how I became involved in the things I've been involved in, and it's really through the feminist art movement. And when I was just starting out my teaching career in Philadelphia, Diane Burko had just been made aware of the feminist art movement. This is the early days, back in the really early 1970s. And she decided that she was going to organize something in Philadelphia to focus on women artists. And so I got involved in that. It's when I started to raise funds, which I learned one has to do no matter what, if you want to accomplish anything in the arts. So it was really an epiphany for me, not just to be activist on behalf of women, but the ideas, the aesthetic considerations, the philosophic approach really led me to become the mature artist and to do work that is really based on feminist ideas from that point on. I realized that I was already using feminist ideas, but that I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have the concepts yet. So it was really, and of course I'd been to graduate school and everything, but it was really a revelation to me. Anyway, so I eventually became a professor at Rutgers, as Ellen has said, and then I became a dean and I became associate provost of one of the campuses. I think partly out of being flattered that somebody wanted me to do those kinds of things, because I never expected to do that. So finally I resigned from the Rutgers administration because I needed to go back to making art, and I went back to teaching at Mason Gross School of the Arts, the Rutgers Conservatory School in New Brunswick. And I started a print center, the mission of which was to provide a state-of-the-arts printmaking experience residency for women artists and artists of color. This is the early to mid 1980s. This is when it was a white star, white male, European descended stars in the art world. They had access to print centers. Robert Rauschenberg created his own print center, but women, artists of color, were still all on the periphery. And if you think about print, what we say about prints in the print world is that a print is an original produced in multiples, okay? So every print is considered an original as opposed to a reproduction of an impressionist painting or something like that. So at any rate, but the point about prints is that because there is more than one of the original, it makes for distribution to broader outlets, really. And so the idea of connecting a print shop for artists who are on the periphery with prints would enable their work to be seen and to be appreciated more widely than if we were just inviting them to come have a residency to produce a painting or a sculpture. And we actively marketed, and still are actively marketing the work, because there's no point in having it sit in drawers. It's not doing any good for the art visibility of the artist's ideas if it's not distributed. So we did engage in active marketing right from the start. And we didn't have big staff, so whenever I went someplace, I carried my portfolio, with prints, and I really made cold phone calls to curators, and they were interested, and I'm very pleased with the fact that often acquiring a print from the Brodsky Center was sometimes the first piece by a woman artist or an artist of color that entered the collection of the particular museum. So we were pioneers. We didn't have the vocabulary for BIPOC or women identified or anything like that. It may have been an old-fashioned vocabulary, but we were doing something that was really a pioneer effort that then became much more widespread after the turn of the millennium. So I'm just going to go through a few of these images, and if you don't mind, I'll sit down so I can see them at the same time. And I also brought the catalog for the Rutgers exhibition, so I can pass this around, but I do need it back. Okay, please don't walk off with it. At Rutgers, we had over 400 artists in the 30 years that the center was at Rutgers, and they produced approximately 600 works. So the Rutgers show is actually approximately 100 of those artists. And the curator of the exhibition was my colleague Ferris Olin, and we had been doing work together for ever since the 1970s, when we first met through the feminist art movement. So as you can see, it's an all-woman shop for quite a long time. Eventually, we allowed a man to become one of the master printers, and he was okay. But it was really wonderful to be able to find women who were qualified to be master printers. And then I think one of the things I just wanted to say, one of the things about the Brodsky Center, and this is about printmaking in general, I think, it becomes a community and it becomes a mentoring situation and a friendship situation. And so people would come and work at the center and then go on to different places. So Lynn Allen, for instance, who's the second from the right, left us because she became the dean of the School of Art at Boston University. So in addition to sending prints out over the world that were by women and artists of color, we also sent people out. And that's also something that I think was very important and still is very important for the shop. Okay, this is by Willie Birch. He had just been to the Million Man March. He was full of it. This is a completely handmade paper piece, as you can see, with references to the situation for black males. He now lives in New Orleans, but some of you may have known him when he was more associated.
What year was that, Judy?
This is approximately 1990. Okay, a lot of what I'll show you will be 1990 or later. Next, please. Okay, this is Willie Cole. Willie Cole, you may know his work. He shows through Alexander and Bonin. He is identified as making work about the history of slavery, and these are also a couple of the first large-scale digital prints. And they're a really good example of digital printmaking because and how it can be used. We photographed Willie himself in the nude, and then he photographed the undersides of silex irons, and then created these fake ethnographic costumes as a satire on the way in which white anthropologists categorized black cultures that they encountered in the world as primitive. The next one, please. This is Jean Quick to See Smith, and I hope that many of you saw her big exhibition at the Whitney Museum. And I was really touched when the show opened at Rutgers, and she wrote me this beautiful note that said how much that she appreciated the attention we had given her during a period when Native American artists were completely ignored. So it was, really wonderful to have something like that. And this is called What is an American? And of course addressed to the issue that so much of our American history up to this point has not addressed the fact that Native Americans are American and their history belongs in the whole history of this country. Next. Okay. Then we did Femme Folio. This was during 2005, 2006, when the Brooklyn Museum Center for Feminist Art was opening, when the WAC show was going on. And we did a show that focused on artists women artists who had been very influential on the art practice of males as well as females from that point on. So we selected 20 of these pioneers in the feminist art movement. You can see this is Joan Semmel up here on the upper left, and that's the only photograph that she allowed to be an artwork. All her, as you know, all her work, these wonderful paintings, and she has done a lot of photography over the years. So that was really kind of fun. Down below is Nancy Spiro, and I know you can't see it in the slide, but it's a typical Nancy Spiro. The maypole, those are skulls on the ends of the ribbons. Okay, then Carolee Schneemann in the middle, with something that relates to her paintings rather than to her performances, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And then Joyce Kozloff over on the right, and Emma Amos. And one of the things that happened, it's 2001, 2022, is in Philadelphia, there was a solo show retrospective of Emma Amos at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and Joan Semmel had a solo show at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Next, please. Next. Okay. Mel Edwards, you're probably familiar with his wonderful sculptures that are based on implements of slavery. And this was the second print that we published of his work. Next. I'm just going to go through these really quickly. Leon Golub from his South African period when he was making art about the oppression under apartheid. Next. This is a print by an artist named, her name just went out of my head. I'm sorry. But I'll think of it in a minute. But she's considered the mother of the arts community in Newark. And this is about homeless people, and her idea was to show homeless people as kind of charming individuals, rather to counteract the stereotype of homeless people as being as one avoiding even looking at them. Next. And this is by Trenton Doyle Hancock, an young African-American artist, because he's not so young anymore. He was young when he came to us. He's the youngest artist ever to be in the Whitney Biennial, and he does this kind of cartoon work, sort of related to Philip Guston. It's about the battle between good and evil, with the idea that the good people, the mounds, and this is mound meat up here, this pink stuff, the good people, the mounds, have color in them, but the bad people, like this over here on this particular module over here, the evil people have no color whatsoever. They're just plain. The next one. And this is Hugh Locke, British artist, but you may know his work because he was commissioned to do one of those projects for the outside of the Metropolitan Museum last year. And this is a piece that is three-dimensional. It's meant to be a satire of ceremonial objects that are given in the white colonialist community to governors of India by the Brits or whatever. And so instead of having it be a silver urn, a silver chalice, it's made from junk, as well as from silkscreen pieces, but made from junk from a dollar store. Next. And this is Hulock himself working on it. I stuck a couple of these in. Next. Okay, Faith Ringgold. This is based on her tapestries that she did about artists going to Europe. And this is, she has a fictional little American, Black American girl who wants to be an artist, has gone to France, is visiting Van Gogh, who's over there in his sunflower field, but she's brought all these Black heroines with her, and they're busy making their own quilt and ignoring poor Van Gogh who's over in the corner there. Next. This is a Latinx artist, New Jersey-based, Gloria Rodriguez, and works with photography, works with pattern, and works with religious images, but they become secularized in her work. Next. And Phil Orenstein, some of you may have seen this, it was on display at the Met for a couple of months, a little while ago. And this is about his coming to America after having been a hidden Jewish child in France. And he came over on the, wait a minute, I'll tell you in a minute, the name of the cheese. Anyway, the print is called The Big Cheese because there's a brand of cheese that's the same name as this particular ship. And it's all about leaving the horrible things in Europe. You can see Stalin and Hitler over there, but also that America didn't turn out to be completely the ideal country that they thought it was going to be. Nevertheless, all Phil could think about when he was on the ship coming over was that he was coming to the land of Walt Disney, because he was only about 7 or 8 years old at the time. Next one. This is Fred Wilson working with floor plans. He did a whole suite of floor plans of museums, but with the idea of kind of showing how museums were not the bastions of information always, that was important information, and these have sometimes, as it is here, you see that the names of certain galleries, but on other ones, it's only the restrooms that are named, or it's only the shop that's named. Next one. This is Alexandra Arakea, and he is a Cuban who is New Orleans based a lot of the time, and this is about the Hurricane Katrina. This was used as the signature piece for Prospect One, the first biennial, I think it was supposed to be a biennial in New Orleans. And it's called Mississippi Bucket, and what it's about, and he actually made a sculpture that relates to this also, and it was about the fact that the dams didn't hold and the neighborhoods that got destroyed were the Black and the poverty-stricken neighborhoods. Next. And this is an artist she's Palestinian, Lebanese Palestinian. All her work is about the situation in the Middle East, so it's extremely pertinent at the moment, obviously. And all of us are thinking about that, along with other places in the world. And this is specifically about the British Mandate, however, and about the British cavalry coming in and controlling the area. Next. I'm just going through these really rapidly.
Can you say her name, the Palestinian artist? Do you
I'm
know
sorry?
her name? The Palestinian artist, do you know her name?
Yes, it's Zina Barakat.
Thank you.
She's in California at the moment. Anyway, and this is, and I have some good stories about her actually, and about the situation, from when she was living there. And this is by Native American artist James Lavador, and James Lavador this is the first print he ever made. And he got so excited about printmaking that he went back to the Umatilla Reservation and he established a print shop called something Crow. And at any rate, that print shop became a very important center for not only for Native American artists, but for all the artists in the communities along in Washington and Oregon. Next. And it's always about landscape and about sovereignty. Next. And this is by an artist named Melissa Gould, and she came with an old map of New York, and we had to take out all of the street names and put in the street names of Berlin at the start of World War II. She had spent a year in Germany on a fellowship. She had gone to Auschwitz because her grandparents had been killed at Auschwitz. And so the idea is New York, it's the idea that never again. And so everything is renamed for the parks and streets in Berlin. Next. And these are by Native American artist Melanie Yazzie. They're handmade paper. Just this one on the right. This is also by Native American, Corwin Claremont. The Corwin Claremont is about the fact that a road was going to be put through the reservation. And so it's called Split Shield. And you can't see it, but there is a line that splits it. And the black is actually made from molds of tire fragments, blowout tires that he brought with him. And we made handmade paper sculptures that then created the outer band of the print of the project. And the feathers down here all have images of trucks on them. And then Melanie Yazzie, the paper is actually pulled in this moth shape. And she then treated the moth shape as kind of like a fetish image. And she treated each one of them separately and put images on that had to do with the difficulties of Native American communities. Next. This is by a Japanese American, and it's about the fact that the Japanese were not truthful in the history books that she had read when she was a child, and she didn't know about the occupation and oppression in Korea and Manchuria. And so she took these photographs of these monuments that celebrated Japanese heroism and then did images and text over them to show what really happened. And next, Miriam Shapiro, and she came to the studios and said, I need to do a jazz image. I've never done a jazz image, and every 20th century male artist has done a jazz image, and I need to do one. So we talked to the Jazz Institute at Rutgers and found out a lot about different jazz figures who were women, and this is an homage to Mary Lou Williams, who wrote the song The Land in Oubli Dee, which eventually became a Beatles song. Next. And on the left is Juan Sanchez, who is an ardent Puerto Rican nationalist. I mean, he's a New Yorker, and some of you probably know him. And then the upside down palm tree is the image that is used by Puerto Rican nationalists to complain about their situation with the U.S. federal government. And on the right is Pasita Abad's piece. She's Filipino. There was just a big solo exhibition of her work that I think is now gone to San Francisco. And she's interested in cultures, in cultures, people of color, not white culture. So you can see the African influence in that. Next. And this is Ellen Sui, who keeps making, the front page of the New York Times. He had never made paper before, and he fell in love with making paper, and he did a whole series. I know it's hard to see what it's actually about. And he got so excited about paper at the center that he invited the paper maker and her graduate student assistant to come to Nigeria and work in his studios to see if there were local vegetation in Nigeria that could be used for handmade paper. Next. And this is Joan Snyder, who again, many of you may know, and this is one of her paper pulp pieces where she actually painted with paper pulp, and so she was able to get the kind of texture and sort of dimensionality that she could get in her impasto painting. Next. And Deborah Cass, and this is, I'm sure all of you know, you probably know Deborah, many of you, but also you're familiar with Andy Warhol's Chairman Mao. This is Chairman Ma, and of course it's Gertrude Stein. Next. And this is Magdalena Campos Pons, who currently has a solo show at the Brooklyn Museum and also just received a MacArthur Genius Grant, and she is also Cuban originally, came over in one of the little fishing boats to get to the United States. And this is her print about surveillance, and the idea of this is her back, actually, based on the photograph that we took of her in the studio. And then all the eyes are actually handmade paper that are then collaged onto the print. Next one. And on the left, Barclay Hendricks, who has the solo show at the Frick at the moment. They say it's the first solo show by a Black artist. I can't remember ever there being a solo show of a contemporary artist at the Frick, to tell you the truth. So I think it goes even further than what they say. And on the right is Young Sun Min, and it's about her family having been forced to leave Korea during the period when the North and South Korea countries were created. And in the background are scenes of the Yalta Conference when the leaders of the Western world decided that should take place. And then the photographs are actually lithos that are collaged onto the surface. Next. And Kiki Smith, and these are costumes she brought with us, and we dressed her in the costumes, took photos, and then she drew from the photos. So they're her typical, drawing style. And next. And there she is in the studio. Next. And then I thought this would be fun to pair these. This is by a Cuban artist, and it's marks, and it's 2 layers. And so you can see that the eye opens and you see the inner part of the eye, sort of with the idea that Marx is not the God that people think he is, but a human being. And then over here, Micheline Thomas. Next. I think there he is. Okay, next. And this is an artist who lives in New Jersey, Betty Blank, the Pink Cadillac, the Aretha Franklin song, and the idea of, the desire and what desire means to different people. Next. And then Elizabeth Catlett on the right, she came to us when she was 99 and vital and, active and everything. And that's her print on the left. And then this is Nell Painter, the historian turned artist, and the parent, who is also African American. And I just think the pairing is an interesting one. And next. And this is Richard Tuttle, who came with toy lizards. And this is, the name of this is something like The Portrait That Isn't a Portrait. And so the book is full of these sort of odd things. And this is the handmade paper sculpture cover that we made for it. Oh, the missing portrait, it says it right there. Okay, next one. And this is what the inside of, this is one of the spreads of the inside of the book. Next. And this is June Wayne, the founder of the Tamarind Lithography Workshop. And we had her at the studio when she, it was the celebration, 200th anniversary of lithography. So there's the lithostone, there's a scene of tamarind trees, and then this hooping crane, because she said the printers, as a result of her work in the United States, to train master printers, they were like the hooping cranes, which almost were extinct and now are a viable population. I think that's the last one. And then this is Pat Steer and Ann Waldman, and they worked together on this big, long accordion book. Next. There they are. And next. And finally, this is the last one. This is Margot Humphrey, and it's the story of her life across her face. And this became a really hot print. And there's actually a very active secondary market in this print, and many museums bought this. And I'm sure it was the first piece at many museums by first acquisition of a work by an African American woman. And I think that's the end. Yeah, okay, good. On women artists who work with digital technology. And I have to say that I am so excited because I met Claudia Hart here tonight, and I had never met Claudia, but I've written about her in the book. And the other person who's in the room is Adrienne Wurzel, who's on the cover. She's on the cover. I mean, she's on the cover. her work is on the cover of the book. So there may be others of you here who are in the book. I've not said hello to everybody yet. Anyway, you'll have fun taking a look through it.
Well, first of all, thank you for that incredible, as someone who studied in Japan and is a master paper maker, I'm thrilled to see how much paper you're using in your studio. My distinct pleasure to introduce to you Lisa Cartwright, Professor of Visual Arts and Director of the Practice Concentration in the Art History, Theory, and Criticism PhD program at UC San Diego, where she's also appointed in Communication and Science Studies and affiliated with the Design Lab in Critical Gender Studies. She holds a PhD in American Studies from Yale, and her books include a lot of books I'm using actually in my own teaching, Practices of Looking, Screening the Body, which I use in my medical humanities class, and Tracing Medicine's Visual Culture, all part of the same title, and Moral Spectatorship. Professor Cartwright's talk, Embodied Pacific Ocean Field Sites and Feminist Data Materialism, will move through projects of 4 artists from the Getty PSD Embodied Pacific Project, Claudia Arendt, Catherine Eng, Ana Gloria Rodriguez, and Ale de la Puente. These will be featured in a chapter from a book on feminist art theory and history that Cartwright is working on with Nora Vag, Natalia, excuse me for any mispronunciation, and Anya Johansson, NTNU in Trondheim. Join me in welcoming Lisa Cartwright.
Thanks, Patricia, and thanks, Ellen. Really thrilled to be here and to be part of the Cyland co-sponsor, presenting with Natalia. And I'm actually not the director of the Practice PhD. Molly Gaines is, and I'm on sabbatical, which is why I can be here. I teach at UC San Diego, where we have a department that crosses history and theory and practice of art with the books on critical research-based practice. And with Nan Renner, who is a cognitive scientist and curator at the Birch Aquarium. She has a PhD in human-computer interaction studies, and that is a very strong component of what I do in my work across science studies and art practice. Really invested in this idea of doing critical practice as theory and as politically, socially engaged theory through practice. So Nan Renner and I are co-PIs on a Pacific Standard Time art program. You're probably familiar with the Getty PST, which has been rebranded from Pacific Standard Time to PST Art. If you can go to the next slide, David. It started out with these 4 PSTs, which you might remember: LALA, the one on architecture, the original one on Los Angeles arts. So for 10 years, Getty Foundation has been putting, this year it's this 4-year period at $17 million into 45 West Coast exhibitions that try to come up to speed with New York and the kind of standard global art projects. So we're funded for 4 years to do this, and the shows will be in 2024. Next slide. These are some of the other exhibitions that are being funded for 2024. We've all been in production since 2019. And the rebranding has gone from Pacific Standard Time to PSD Art. And if I could have the next slide. And this is our project that began as Navigating the Pacific. So UCSD, I helped to start an intersection between art history, the PhD in art history and art practice, and environmental research at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And so our project in this thematized 4-year period on science and art is focusing on oceanography. But what happened is that because Nan's work is on interaction studies and mine is in feminist materialism and socially engaged practice, we ended up doing a lot of work around craft, community-based work, and 3 out of 12 of our projects involved in local indigenous groups. And so I'm going to be talking about some of these intersections. We're working with 35 people across a dozen projects. During the pandemic, we began in 2019 thinking that we were going to be doing archivally based projects, but we couldn't because of the pandemic. And so we ended up moving from the lab and the archive to the field. So all of the projects became focused on being out on boats or building boats, as opposed to being in laboratories and being in the archive. We had one person in the archive, and when we were in laboratories, it was usually on a boat. So we also had a number of differently branded Zoom series, including one called Oceans at Night, and they were mostly sponsored by the Design Lab, where Pinar Yoldish and I have a lab on speculative ecology and bioarchitecture. So these are just some of the events that we did. We did probably about 20 Zoom events around thematic issues. The first one was around a Kumeyaay project that I'll be speaking about briefly. Another one on mosaic ocean and imaging pelagic creatures. Okay, and some of our co-sponsors and partnerships are with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. We're really inspired by critical craft studies, feminist critical craft studies, and the Kosai Kumeyaay market. We work pretty closely with a few people in the Kumeyaay tribe. They are the one of the biggest tribal groups in San Diego. San Diego has more tribal communities than any county in the United States. Okay, so if we could have the next. We have 2 book manuscripts out for review now from the project, and we're moving into, we've produced many projects, and we're now preparing for the 2024 exhibitions. So we have 5 sites for the exhibitions: Birch Aquarium at Scripps, a marsh reserve, 2 galleries, and a community market that's really a gallery of Kumeyaay craft production. I'm going to be talking about the artists who produced our main image here in a minute, so I'll hold off on that. If we can have the next slide, David. Okay, so one of the projects, I'm just going to go through the projects till my time is up because we have so many of them. This is Rachel Myrie. Some of you may know Rachel Myrie's work in collaboration with Deborah Forster. Deborah Forster is a cognitive scientist who's worked with some of the most renowned figures in primate interaction. How do primates interact? And how is power manifested in primate communities? Rachel is a feminist filmmaker, and she's made some really both hilarious and really super smart films about primate behavior and gender and sexuality. And so their primate television, their primate media is pretty well known. They are now working on the Flip. It's a floating instrument platform. Flip is a one-of-a-kind boat that was built in 1963 that was supposed to be a prototype for other boats. It is basically a 335-foot boat that 2/3 of it is a probe. It goes down into the ocean, it flips up. You see it midway flip here. It flips up and goes very deep into the ocean with cameras, sonar, every kind of sensor that you can name. So it's just this big kind of phallic instrument that goes down. And up here you have the whole crew on, if we could go to the next slide, see how the sink, you have 2 sinks. So everything flips out. So their project is drawing from Sarah Ahmed's queer phenomenology, orientation at sea. Of course, dealing with sexual orientation. They've done tango dance at sea. We can't take the Flip out. It's docked. It won't go out again anymore. It's this kind of googie modernist relic that, but we have access to it. So projects that have been done in the past 3 years on the Flip. LiDAR. Rachel is doing synchronized swimming projects with her sister. Rachel is making a film. So we've thoroughly documented the Flip, but not just like, and here's our digital twin, but here is our completely distorted, disorienting critique of the idea of a digital twin, an idea of orientation at sea. Okay, next slide. This project, Ale de la Puente, they were part of the first phase through a series that we did called From the Sky to the Ocean Floor. Ale and Nydia Pineda de Avila are collaborators from Mexico City. Ale is an artist. Natalia is a 14th, 15th century astronomical historian. And they're working on the measurement of time and space and trying to understand the deep history of digital computational knowledge that goes back many centuries to using instruments. So they built a model of this instrument. They went camping, they put it on the beach, they used shells for measurement. Ale took it out of the boat when she was a Schmidt Ocean Institute artist at sea. So it's this ongoing project around empire and time, and how do you reorient time, not just by using new digital technologies, but by rethinking the digital as an embodied practice that is in itself a physical instrument, your computer as a physical instrument. Not a new idea, but they're really extending this at sea. The next slide, David. So you can see they're trying to understand sundials, and this was a project that it's a speculative project about a future equinox. Okay, so they want to do things like to dimension our ways of being and acting. So it's very much about, they took students out into the field during the pandemic and had them camp and take notes on paper. Okay, so next slide. Another project, Nan and I spent most of our time with Stan Rodriguez, who is a PhD linguist and a member of the Kumeyaay community. Only 40 people pretty much speak Kumeyaay in the world. And Stan's mission is to bring back the language, but also to do it through the generation of a fleet of Kumeyaay canoes. And so this whole movement has built up in the past 4 years or so, where interculturally people are involved in building these canoes with Stan. So this is Danny McCaskill, who's one of our scientists on the project. She works with kelp, and so she's a kelp ecologist in a laboratory at Scripps, and she's harvesting two-lay reeds, where we then go in different kinds of groups. This is my colleague Nan Renner, who's my co-PI. This is Stan Rodriguez. He's taught, at this point, probably a couple of hundred people how to make these boats. And periodically there are row-outs, so that you have these fleets of boats that used to populate the Kumeyaay land on which San Diego and our university sit. So it's a taking over of the land by the Kumeyaay through the culture, an intercultural project of building out the canoes. Okay, next slide. This was the first row out, 2021, that we had worked on making all of these boats. Nan and I spent the whole summer helping with these, but we were not the only ones. There were literally 50 people at that point. Okay, and then the next slide. Scott McAvoy and Jess Ashok, a Becher-like grid of the 24 different boats showing how different they are, LiDAR and photogrammetry of the boats. So it's not just kind of low-tech craft, it really is across the spectrum. The boats being stored, this is the tarp that covered them in the rain at the Kendall Frost Marsh Reserve. Okay, the next slide. We then began to work with Kilma S. Latin and Catherine Eng. Catherine is a Cooper Union trained digital artist who works with a Pala Tribe business leader on an enterprise called Our World. And they're doing an immersive reality, extended reality that's on your phone that inserts historical data about indigenous cultures into the landscape as you hold up your phone. So they're building out this technology of these stories. They're very beautiful. And they are intentionally not digital twin, high-tech, hyper-realist. They're drawing on other aesthetics, the points of fire, as opposed to a very realist look. If we could see the next slide, you can see a little bit more. This is Catherine doing green screen of the boats. And this is Catherine at a launch where she's going to do a panorama. Okay, the next one. And this was me on the train playing with the app so that you could see what it would look like to put the canoes into the Amtrak. It's another form of moving around. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so it's very dark, and these are sometimes installed gallery where you do it immersively, but it's also something you can have on your phone. Next slide. Oh, I think if you hit it again, because now it's just playing the video. Okay, so my project with Nora Vaj and Natalia at the NTNU at Trondheim is about bioart, which many of our projects are dealing with biomatter and living matter. And Nora has this wonderful piece. She did her dissertation on symbiotica and TC&A, tissue culture. And she's really asking, what are the ethics of bioart? And how can we really be in dialogue with scientific ethics and with activists? So we have this project together, and many of the projects on the Pacific Standard Time side are intersecting with this project. If we could I'll just show one more and then we'll stop. So if we could just go one more. I'll skip the turtle. This is my project. I love the turtle's getting a prosthetic. Yeah, right. It doesn't have a name and you're not supposed to feel empathy for it. It's a turtle. If we could just skip. I know, but I mean.
Yeah, it's a living thing.
Okay, I will talk about it now. So Scott, who does a lot of our photogrammetry and LiDAR on all of our projects, built using a medical facility, did tomography of this turtle that got damaged in a New Jersey power plant. And he keeps on building new shells for it on a 3D printer as it grows. But the aquarium, it got shipped out to Birch Aquarium because of course we're better equipped out there than in New Jersey now. It was down here for a while and then it got shipped to us. The aquarium won't name the turtle because they don't want to anthropomorphize it. And they really dissuade a kind of humanistic approach to the turtle. But it leads a nice life in a really ginormous tank. Just one more slide, I think, one or two. David, if we could just have one more. Yeah, this would take a while to go into. Okay, so this is the first woman to receive a PhD in oceanography. Easter Ellen Cupp, yes, she's named after the holiday. When she arrived at Scripps in the 20s, she was the first woman to study. She couldn't go out on a boat because women weren't allowed out on boats. She did near-shore diatoms, and she wrote the book on diatoms that got used for 100 years. However, she was let go from Scripps and became a science teacher, a job that was found for her by her girlfriend. So she lived in San Diego with her girlfriend for 60 years, 70 years, and as a science teacher. So she is the subject of two projects, and this is a drawing by Amy Adler. And if we could just go through two more slides. These are some of Easter Ellen Cupp's works in preparation for the diatom book. The second woman to get a PhD in oceanography was also a lesbian, June Patullo. She did physical oceanography. And just two more slides and then I'm done. Judith Hersko does these reproductions. Judith Hersko is one of the artists on her project. She does these reproductions of Easter Ellen Cupp's diatoms. And if we just go back one slide, I'll end with that. And these are the portraits that Amy Adler has made. So we're incorporating very traditional forms like portraiture, along with things like photogrammetry, LiDAR, and the more high-tech approaches, and combining personal history. If we could just go 3 slides, and then I truly will stop. Here, this one, go back one. That's her girlfriend, Dorothy Rosenberry, and that's part of the portrait that Judith Hersko has made. And then the last slide is the next one. And this will be the exhibition of these works. At the top, we have Jeffrey Stucker is doing a very hyper-realist reproduction in 3-dimensional form of the diatoms. Nicholas Miller is doing crystal busts, and Amy Adler's portrait, so the 3 pieces will be together representing Easter Ellen Cupp.
That's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Natalia Kolodzei, an honorary member of the Russian Academy of Arts. She is a curator and she is an art historian. Also executive director of the Kolodzei Art Foundation, which is a US-based 501c3 not-for-profit public foundation established in 1991. And along with Tatiana Kolodzei, owner of the Kolodzei Foundation for Eastern European art, containing over 7,000 artworks, including painting, sculpture, works on paper, photography, kinetic and digital art by over 300 artists of the 20th and 21st centuries. Ms. Kolodzei has curated over 80 art exhibitions in the US and Europe and also Russia. She is an author, an editor of multiple publications, and organized and contributed to symposia and national discussions for universities and museums worldwide, including co-chair of Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous, LASER Cyland talks, and Natalia will discuss reframing nonconformist and media art narratives through the prism of feminism. Join me in welcoming Natalia Kolodzei.
Feminism in Russia have a very complex and multifaceted history. And ever since I remember myself, I was surrounded by artworks, which my mother collected for over 50 years. On my first birthday, the Ukrainian-born artist Pyotr Belinok gave me as a gift the artwork, and that became the seed of my own collection. Today, the Kolodzei collection encompasses more than 7,000 artworks, including paintings, works on paper, artist prints, sculptures, multimedia, video installation by more than 300 artists from Russia, Eastern Europe, and former Soviet Union. My mother, Tatiana, was one of the only women collectors back in Russia. When she was, next slide please. When she was only 17, she met George Kostakis and Zinaida, his wife, and saw his collection at Collecting Bug for Life. His collection and one of the few other collectors, including Yakov Rubinstein, Abram Chudnovsky, contained the works of artists, next slide please, which could not be seen anywhere in Russia, including the women artists Pakova, Rozanova, Udaltsova, as well as Kandinsky, Rodchenko, Ritsko, and others. In the Kolodzei collection, there is a large number of works by women artists, which allows the foundation to present the project Women in Art since 1998. Women in Art project covers the three generations of women artists and includes works in different media, the paintings, photography, interactive installations, and video. Next slide. That's in 2002, in the initiative of Professor Alison Hilton of Georgetown, we organized the exhibition New Identities, New Forms. And then in 2008, the project turned into from nonconformism to feminism. And the first presentation was here in the Chelsea Art Museum in New York. Each exhibition in this project highlights different aspects of gender issues within the history of the women artists and strives to bring the visibility to women artists. Before we dive into today's discussion, I would like to outline some of the history behind the feminism and women's rights, at least in Russia. Next slide. Among the predecessors who initiated and contributed a great deal towards the women emancipation in Russia was Catherine the Great, and she ascended the throne in 1762. She was well-educated and intelligent woman, and she opened the famous Smolny School. It was the first school for the girls in the history of the Russian Empire. And later, the reforms of 1860s gave the women their rights to the higher education. Another important outcome of these reforms was the rise of the new Arish, including the two women, who became very prominent patrons of the arts, Mamontova and Princess Tenisheva. These two women founded two workshops in the estates where the peasant women were able to create embroidery, ceramics, and wood carving. In 1883, Tenisheva organized a school which prepares both female and male students to enter the academy. One of the professors, Ilya Repin, who was known for his belief in the ability of the women to become professional artists, and one of his students, Elizaveta Zvyantseva, was the founder of several art schools in Moscow and St. Petersburg, where for the first time male and female students could work together from the nude models. During the 19th and 20th century, women artists Golubkina, Goncharova, next slide, Popova, played a crucial role in the visual rights. That's the cover for the book Russian Amazon from the Guggenheim Museum. They established themselves on an equal footing with their male counterparts, not only by force of numbers, but by expression their intellectual and theoretical skills, and by quality and quantity of their artistic productivity. In the 20s, the Amazon, Esther Goncharova, Popova, Rozanova, Stepanova, Daltsova, they were coined by the poet Benedict Lifshitz. This woman artist took over many art schools. They designed posters, books, theaters, and in case of Popova and Stepanova, they actually organized the textile print factories. This allowed them to carry their innovations, ideas beyond the studio. In this time, in the early teens, this was a collaboration and mutual influences between male and female artists and the poets as well. Goncharova, Larionov, Guro, Matushin, Stepanova, Rodchenko. Following the Bolshevik Revolution, and the collaboration and cooperation between women and men reached the peak, both in art and life, and was manifested as free marriage, free companionship, radical ideas, it was radical ideas of the time, as well as several women's magazines, including the Peasant Woman. Next slide. Soon after the 1930s, the mythology and ideology of socialist realism prevailed, and women's emancipation went the way the other utopias went. Instead of cultivating the self-consciousness, the socialist realism created the woman hero, the woman mother. A number of those titles were aimed to conceal the physical exploited and powerless women masses. Meanwhile, men were taking back all important positions in art and politics. A few women were honored by inclusion, but just a few. Some of the courageous women who continued to create non-socialist realism in Stalinist era, like Platova, Sinikova, they were expelled in the 50s. And other artists like Kogan or Ender, who were physically able to survive the Stalinist repressions, but their activities were interrupted in the 30s and never revived. The Khrushchev saw made the way for new directions and in art and helped to undermine the total domination of socialist realism. Next slide, please. There were just a few women artists which emerged in the nonconformist circles. With the Khrushchev condemnation of patriarchal sovereignty, the Soviet leaders were more willing to include women. One of them, Ekaterina Furtseva, who was chosen the Minister of Culture. The other, astronaut Valentina Tereshkova, who went to space. And of course, some of us remember Ekaterina Furtseva was not very fond of contemporary or modern art. And when Chagall came to Russia in 1973, she told him at the opening, if you stayed in Russia, you would become a better painter. So that was the Minister of Culture in the Soviet Union. In the 70s and 80s, one can point out equally unfavorable repressive conditions for nonconformist male and female artists, including lack of commercial opportunities, little chance to exhibit publicly, isolation from the Western and cultural trends, including feminisms, and also even works by the great avant-garde artists like Popova, Esther Goncharova were not publicly shown. The breakthrough came in part and the consequences in Moscow in the open-air bulldozer exhibition on September 15th, 1974. For various reasons, there were not so many women nonconformist artists, next slide, in the nonconformist circles, compared, for example, to the Baltics, where there was a large number of women artists in nonconformist circles. But anyway, Lydia Masterkova, Nadezhda Elskaya, and Tatiana Levitskaya did participate in the bulldozer exhibition. The exhibition became famous because the government sent bulldozer against it, and a lot of works were destroyed. The myth of next slide. The myth of 70s in Moscow brought the rebirth of the avant-garde spirit at the beginning as well as the beginning of the new trends. Conceptual art, performance art, visual poetry became the most contemporary forms of art expression in nonconformist art. And this slide for Irina Nakhova, who was representing that's the Venice Biennale in 2015. She was the first woman. She was yes, and actually she did the print. Yeah, she did the print with the Brodsky Center as well. Yes. It is interesting to note that during blossoming of nonconformist art groups, including the Nest and the Caucus factions, where Nakhova was affiliated with, there was no groups exclusively women artists. In the West, because we heard, the feminism was rooted in art communities, such as like Feminist Art Project, which was started by Chicago and Shapiro. In contrast, in Russia, feminist discourse was almost non-existent in nonconformist circles, talking about 70s and 80s. Not only because it was considered a more like a form of dissent, but also for perception of art as individualistic practice, which had to be performed in seclusion. In the 1980s, Russian women artists tended to be very skeptical of Western feminism, the ideas of it, or even rejected it outright. Most of the women claimed there was no need for this kind of assertion of women distinct needs, as socialism had institutionalized women's rights and women's equality through laws and quotas in all areas of life, from representation in parliament to the job equality. However, although women artists gained equal status in the public sphere, the patriarchal system, they have a double burden, and they continue to shoulder traditional domestic and parental duties at home. Virtually everyone worked, such as in the case with the Nakhova, for the state-run agencies during the Soviet period. Many artists were employed as book designers, illustrators, or stage designers. Possibly this double duty situation made many women artists stronger and dynamically driven, more organized, and very comfortable with ambition. However, next slide. However, for the most part, women did not connect emotionally or intellectually with Western feminism. Sympathy with Western feminism grew as the capitalist economical system gradually began to emerge during the period of glasnost, affecting the role of women in society and in the family. At the end of the 80s, the question of feminism, the gender differences, became essential in the process of forming the discourse of contemporary art and its ideological contexts. In the early 90s, several significant feminist exhibitions took place, including Women in Art in 1989, which was curated by Olesya Tupkina and Viktor Mazin. Then, Women as Subject and Object, curated by Natalia Kamenetskaya in Moscow. Women Worker in 1990, which was curated by Anna Alchuk, Elena Romanova, and Elena Selinova. These exhibitions indicate a new attitude towards women's identity, self-identification, and their role in Russian society, and the messages they choose to deliver. In some cases, feminism was also related to corporal radicalism, especially in the performance art. One of the prominent digital artists in Russia, Olynyk, Lyanina's work often deal with the female body and the ways in which it is presented in the media. For example, in her work, My Boyfriend Came Back from War, she created a website that allows the users to manipulate the images of the human body, of the women bodies. From the mid-90s to 2003, the feminist movement and exhibitions flourished. The main museum, Tretskoy Gallery, organized Femme Art, which covered the women artists from 15th century to the 20th century. It was followed by, but later on it was followed by the new censorship and restrictions which appeared as a result of the exhibition Caution Religion in 2003 and Forbidden Art in 2007. Both exhibitions were organized by the Sakharov Museum and Community Center in Moscow. This exhibition started the process of testing the fragility of Russian new freedoms. In 2012, inspired by the mass demonstrations, a Pussy Riot staged a punk performance inside the Cathedral of the Christ. And Telaknova and Alyokhina were later arrested and jailed for 18 months. The trajectory of feminism thus had a different character in Russia, where women were officially equal to men in the professional world, and where the backlash against the communist ideology following the collapse of the Soviet Union opened the society up later opened society up to the new conservative and reactionary forces. Next slide. While there is a growing interest in the works by female artists, one cannot say that they would have been widely represented. For example, at the exhibition Russia in the Guggenheim Museum in 2005, from 40 living artists exhibited, only 5 was women artists. This included Natalia Nesterova, Tatiana Nazarenko, Svetlana Kapustyanskaya, conceptual works, objects by Rima Gerlovina, and Olga Chernyshova's video. Next slide. In 2021, the Kolodzei Foundation marked 30th anniversary of encouraging a more diverse art world to advancing knowledge of the Russian and Eastern European art. Next slide. We are delighted to collaborate with the Cyland Media Lab on a number of projects, including presentation of SciFest here in New York. And in 2022, we organized the exhibition ID Art and Tech, selection from the Kolodzei Foundation and the Frants family collection in Minneapolis. This exhibition featured 40 works by Russian, Russian-American, Ukrainian, Ukrainian-American, and Estonian artists. The Kolodzei Foundation, next slide. The Kolodzei Foundation is proud to contribute to the dialogue around feminism and digital art by presenting works by digital artists and women artists in all of our exhibition, including, for example, Moscow Grafica, which we organized in the International Print Center in 2005. Next slide. This leads to fire in the Newburgh Museum in 2014. Next slide. Finding Freedom, selection from the Kolodzei Foundation and Dr. Wayne Yates in Lafayette, Louisiana, 2014. Next slide. That's another view from the next slide. Also, Moscow, New York parallel play, both NCCA and the Chelsea Art Museum. Next slide. Concerning the spiritual tradition, also in the Chelsea Art Museum. Next slide. And here's the SciFest 14 presentation at the National Arts Club in New York in 2023. Nevertheless, today it is possible to speak of representation of women artists in the United States. through their presence is not as large as desirable. In 2001, on the basis of interviews with Professor Matthew and Renee Bigel, published in Peeling Potatoes, Painting Pictures, Women Artists in the Post-Soviet Russia, Estonia, and Latvia, the first decade, the Zimmerle Museum organized a major exhibition based on Norton and Nancy Dutch collection of the nonconformist art. The Bigel compilation of interviews and was encouraging attempt, at least in English, to collect and to hear the reflections about gender issues from the primary sources, namely from the artists themselves, not instead the interpretations from the critics or the curators. These examples of the exhibition practice and the publication allows artists to become better known. Next slide. To become better known to the American audience. There are obvious interest in the works by women artists. However, one cannot say that they have been widely presented in a gender-focused art. This occurred because for a long time, the Russian artists did not position their artworks in the context of the gender issues. On the contrary, in every possible way, they avoided preferring to act on a level with men, considering a gender imperative as marginalizing their work. Certainly, this position and viewpoint resulted from the course. Next slide. Resulted from the course that gender politics took place in the Soviet Union, which was different from the one here in the West. In the 50 years since Linda Nochlin asked why have been no great women artists, Russian women artists still aspire to find their place in the international art world. The publication of anthology of manifestos, essays, reflections of women artists in English, similar to primary documents, is still necessary for understanding gender issues in Russia. Next slide. Today, analyzing the works by women artists from the positions of gender discourse, they can find unique forms of expression. Gender-based research allows us to have a new view of nonconformist and contemporary art, finding in its new stories and another subject in inquiry, which helped to unravel the complexity and the life of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll hold questions until we have the panel, and we'll go on at this point to our fourth presentation. Anna Frants is an artist and curator in the field of media art. Anna graduated from the Vera Mukhina Higher School of Art and Design, which is in Leningrad, USSR, and Pratt Institute, New York. Co-founder of the nonprofit cultural foundation St. Petersburg Arts Project, Cyland Media Art Lab, and SciFest Festival. France's interactive installations have been shown at the Moscow Biennale of Contemporary Art in Russia, when they had them, obviously. Video Guerrilla Festival in Brazil, Manifesta 10, the Biennale in St. Petersburg, Russia, 2014, Museum of Art and Design, New York, the Hermitage, St. Petersburg, Russia, the Chelsea Art Museum, New York, the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, Kunstkartier Bethanian in Berlin. The artist's works are in the collections of Russian Museum in St. Petersburg. Anna will discuss reframing narratives and feminist interventions in media art festivals. So I can think you're able to see the connections between these presentations today, and it's really wonderful that we have these pioneers to really put forth visions of women out there. Anna?
I'll be short, I promise.
You don't have to.
Okay. I'll just give a small introduction what the Cyland Media Lab and SciFest is about. I know that many of you know what it is, but there are some new faces here. So, Cyland Media Lab was founded in 2007 by two women, my friend Maria Kolodzei and myself. Idea was to create a platform for artists and engineers to collaborate. Currently, in addition to creating artworks that use technology as material, we are promoting the emergence of new forms of art and high technology interactions, developing professional connections between artists, curators, engineers, and programmers around the world, and exposing wide audiences to the works in the field of robotics, video art, sound art, and net art. Throughout the years, we produced more than 100 artworks. Our video archive provides access to 600 plus original video works, more than by 100 international artists and art groups. Sound archive to date, there are 58 releases in the archive, including works by more than 80 artists from every continent except Antarctica. Sorry about that. In 2007, Cyland started SciFest, art tech festival that later became largest festival of its kind in Eastern Europe. In 2013, SciFest became a nomadic cultural event. Its exhibitions, concerts, performances, video screenings, lectures, and masterclasses have been held all over the world. All Cyland and SciFest curators, with the exception of sound art, are women. So it's 6-1. Here's the chart of female participation in SciFest from 2007 to 2023. So you can see that in 2023, it's 59% of women took part in SciFest. I will follow with a short video. Thank you.
Yes.
No? Okay.
Yeah, rather than take individual questions, we're going to bring everybody up to the front that just presented, and we can have a conversation with all of you and with them.
Questions from anybody? And if there are none, then we'll just have you have a question.
Okay, you go. Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm in a book club, and we're planning on writing a kids' book for feminism. I want each of you to tell your words of wisdom, and we might include it in the book.
Okay. Feels like a hot seat question.
We'll start with you. Words of wisdom.
Can you repeat it for me, please?
So my book club is gonna be we're gonna be like writing a book on feminism for kids.
On feminism
For
kids.
kids.
Okay.
And we want you to like say like a few words of wisdom.
Right.
A few words of wisdom. Okay.
You might be in her book.
What?
You might be in her book.
Well, what I would say is for girls to realize that they don't have to do what other people want them to do, that they can do anything that they want to do, okay? And that they have the power to change the world, I think. So I would say that they could experiment. And one of the things that I think is interesting is to think about gender, and to think about, you don't have to use that word, but to think about the relationships between human beings, and the fact that that in the past, human beings have had defined roles that limited people in various ways, and that we want to do away with any limitations so that everybody can do what he, she, they would like to do and feel that they have contributed to the world.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, from my standpoint, and I'll go from digital arts and robotics, it's the public opinion is usually that the men are better in robotics and engineering stuff and stuff like this. This is not true.
Yeah.
That's my word of wisdom.
That's very astute. Yeah.
No, but I'm mom, so we can do
Sure. So Anna, it's such a great question, and I think that many of us in this room, we write books, and I think that your book is probably the most important one in this room. And the reason is because I think it's going to be a very complicated world for people and for girls. But as a mother and as a woman and as a feminist, I think that there is no one piece of advice that you can give, because every woman is in a different political situation. My daughter is from Kazakhstan, and she lived there for 5 years, and then she lived in the United States, and we've lived in many different places. And I am second generation here, and I don't agree with a lot of the politics here. So, in the United States. So I think, for me, the most important thing is to realize how important your book is. And I mean that serious. I'm not just saying this to be nice. I really mean it. But the other thing is that I think to realize that all girls in the world don't all face the same reality. And there's a lot of risk. And so women have to stick together, but also understand how there are differences between them that are very, very serious and big.
Could I add something to? I'm sorry, didn't mean
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt the
Please,
clapping. One of the things you might do that Nina and I were talking earlier, and it's pertinent to what everybody was presenting. Maybe you need a little part of it that's about the history of women and all the things that women have done, because there have been women scientists and there have been women mathematicians and there have been women who've done other things. And so I think that's important for girls to know, because I think in a lot of homes, we don't know that kind of thing. And so I would put a little part in about history.
Mom.
Yeah. No, thank you. So, but I will now open the floor for the discussion, and I think we might consider what the technology is offering us in terms of publicizing and get our message out. Is it becoming easier? Is it becoming more difficult? What are advantages? What are disadvantages? We can start with. Because you said something important today, that printmaking offer a possibility for the artist, women artists, and the artists of color kind of get their foot inside some of the museums. It was through the media, and to me it seems also the digital media also offer the similar opportunities for the artists to explore something else.
Well, let me just go off in a direction a little bit, a different direction from that, or starting with that. And that's, is there something special that women from their experience bring to certain fields? For instance, if you look at science, and if you look at medicine, let's just look at medicine as part of science. And so much of it has been about men rather than about women. And so thinking about what women can bring that opens it up to a broader group of human beings, I think is something that is very much a part of what girls could do and should be a part of the book also. So we get into a whole outline for you, I think.
Any questions?
Here's one.
Yeah.
So I couldn't but notice, Natalia, that a lot of the photographs that you have shown had the most youngest and the most curious person involved in the audience today. If you look at the photographies of artworks in the United States, whether it's a professional artwork or if it is from the audience interaction aspect of it, a lot of times children's faces are pixelated for the obvious reasons. I want to understand what was your motivation of including your daughter in the photographs of your artwork, which talk so much about the feminism.
Besides the curatorial kind of practical level, because you see the scale, so you see the scale because you realize how most people met my daughter, so they realize how tall she is in relationship to the objects. But at the same time, it's important for me personally to bring this continuity from my mother to me to my daughter. So it's basically something which will carry like an oral history. I would like her to hopefully be part of it to the extent possible, and to carry this message about nonconformist art and about the artist she met to the other generations. And I usually try to the best of my ability to introduce her to as many artists as possible. I was glad that, for example, we were able to meet like through the Print Club of New York, we were able to meet like Will Barnett, and who was like 100 years old at the time, and some other artists like Ilya Kabakov, who no longer with us. So it's not like she did have like a long and philosophical conversation, but just to be in presence of these other people and to see where they are at this stage of the career. So that's the reason why.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I have a question/comment, and I just as an artist and a student who just started my journey of becoming a professional artist, I could feel that from the talks, the four of you, although coming from different careers and different parts of the art world, you guys ran so that we can walk. So I just really wanted to express my gratitude for that, because it's not easy work to put down something together, to bring women together, to bring people of color together, and giving them a place and space to raise their voice. So I really appreciate you for that. And I assume that there would have been struggles as much as the result is so awesome and so many who benefited from it. And there are just, art is not like a linear journey, and there are ups and downs, and there are moments where you feel like you're getting it, but then someone might say, oh, it's not working, and then you might feel like you're getting it again, but someone might also say, you're not there yet. But what would be like a way to overcome an obstacle? Also, I'm Patricia's student, and Patricia has always helped me to overcome a lot of obstacles. And yeah.
Excellent. Testimonial. Terrific. Yeah.
That's, well, if you look at the art world, it's really interesting, because back in the 1970s, women were already receiving 50% of the PhDs in art history already. I mean, it wasn't something that was developing. It had already developed that way. And nobody was hiring them. And so there, in art history departments, it was something like 5% of the faculty were women, and they were always the instructors. And as you went up the hierarchy, there were very few, if any women who were actually full professors. So if you look at it today, as a result of all of the work that women have done in the art world, it's now, there's not a problem. I think that women are probably in the majority in art departments, art history departments. That's still not true in studio departments. And studio departments were even worse. And women were almost at 50% of the M.F.As in the 1950s. And there were virtually no women's studio. Even in women's schools, for instance, at Rutgers University, Douglas College had its own art department, and all the students were women, and all the professors were men. So then it's impossible to think in terms of, could you succeed if you don't see somebody who's like you, in succeeding in a field. So, we have to keep working, but I think that it shifts. And another achievement, and I think it's important to look at the achievements, another achievement is a complete change in the way in which art history is taught now. Because art history is taught from a global perspective rather than just concentrating on white, male, European art as being at the top of the hierarchy, and everything else is primitive art or whatever. And so now there's a recognition of the importance of recognizing that different cultures have different ways of expressing themselves. And so art history is taught in a completely different way. Much more, and for instance, concentrate on landscape. How do different cultures treat landscape? How do different cultures treat portraiture? How do different cultures teach the image of women, or the body? And so I think that that's a result of activism. And I think it's really important for women, for people of color, for gender non-conforming people to be activists on their own for their own sake. So where there's a problem in the art world at the moment is in the market, and there's a complete disparity between the value of women's art the monetary value of women's art and the monetary value of art by men. And it's huge. So for instance, one of the things that everyone talks about is that at one point there was an auction with a de Kooning painting and a Joan Mitchell painting. And the de Kooning painting went for something like, let me just put out, figures that are probably not accurate at the moment, $500,000, and actually it'd be more, probably $5 million.
Yeah.
And the piece by Joan Mitchell was something like $250,000, something. I don't have the figures quite right, but you get the idea that it's not just 50% more, it's not just 100% more, it's like 500% or 1,000 more. So how to change that is a real difficult problem, and probably will have to do with more collectors who collect art by women artists and promote and move the value up. And if you look at the way in which women artists are treated critically today, that's pretty good. And there are lots of women artists who are at the same level, as their male peers, and should be. So I don't think it's a question of critical approval, but it also has to be that museums buy more art by women and more art by BIPOC artists, and that's still very low. There was just a big study a couple of years ago that showed even though there are blockbusters these days, particularly for BIPOC artists, that the museums have not yet started to buy in enough quantity. And it's something like, in museums, BIPOC artists is only about 2% today, and women artists is something like 15 or 18%, so they're still extremely low. So that needs to change. So these things shift. And then I think a major problem in the US is, where are all the collectors? Why doesn't everybody think that you need to have an original work of art in your living room over your couch? And in the 19th century, the people did think that way. And it may have been a print, it was probably a Currier and Ives print or something like that. But there were two things that signified a household that valued culture. One was to have a piano, and the other thing was to have at least one work of art. And so we need that today because it's a question of both male, female, non-conforming gender artists, everybody. There isn't enough of a market at a wide enough level. Yeah.
Just want to follow up to ask you something about what you're talking about right now. Is that related to the kind of hollowing out of the middle class in this country? And if you look at the gallery system, the middle range of galleries are all going out of business. It's the top echelons that are at 20 branches and are having a global reach. And it seems like all the doctors and lawyers that used to buy our art are no longer doing that. It's only the billionaires. So it feels so connected with the bigger picture of politics in this country.
That's right. Well, you're absolutely right. When I was doing a book talk, not for this book, but for a book on women's leadership in the arts, and my colleague Ferris Olin and I were in Portland, Oregon, and we met with the students at one of the Portland schools, one of the colleges, and so there were about 200 students in the room, and we asked them if they could name women artists. They cannot name women artists yet, and they can barely name a male artist. But when you come to music, everybody knows who all the music people are. And so, I think you're absolutely right. I think art, instead of being something that everybody connects to in the society, particularly the middle class, as having enough money to invest in some kind of art, the value just isn't there in the general society. And I think we have to do something about that as well. and it's a local thing as well. It needs to be, it can't be something that's just in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles / San Francisco. It has to be things that happen at the local level, so that there's a buildup of enough people who are interested in art. I have to say, I am so sick of going into doctors' offices, not to make a bad pun, and see the faded impressionist reproductions on the wall, where all the reds have gone out of them and all you see is the blue. And I want to go and tear them off the wall. And I think you're absolutely right. How do we get, the people who have money? And what I often say when I'm doing a talk, to a group that doesn't know very much about art, I say, look how much you're going to spend when you go out to dinner with your family tomorrow night, and you're going to spend $250 to $300, on a dinner that you're just going to eat, and that's going to be it. Whereas if you didn't go out to dinner and you took that $250 or $300 and bought something by an artist who lives in your community, you would have that, to enjoy, and you would also support the arts.
There's a question back here.
Yeah, I wanted to refer to something that Judy said, but I also want to say something to what you said about what young people could do. And I think it's a much bigger thing. I think that you have an important voice, and it's something you need to learn, and it's only through education that you will learn that. And you need to put together a community of young voices in the United States, but even globally. And I know that's a very big thing that I'm saying, but if you could start small and start even just locally, but then move and get students from different high schools across the country, there's money there, by the way. And I can speak from this because I just spent some time with the people from Hauser and Wirth, for example, and they're doing this whole art education thing that's very important. And I think that if somebody like you, and if you like, I could maybe make a connection or two, but it's so important to get to learn. And it's through learning and then sharing those ideas that will make a difference to really propel the future. I mean, what we've done is one thing, but to move it forward, you need to raise your voice, and you need to, and the fact that you have an incredible mother like you have, you could start this and you could move it, but it's all about learning. It has to start with that. And it has to be, just as Judy said, we have to talk about what we've accomplished thus far, but then where do we go next? And it isn't just in the visual, it's multimedia. It's the technology, it's what is beyond that. It's podcasts, it's video, it's everything together. So that's all I want to say. And I just think it's very much out there. And it's exciting. It's very exciting.
Yeah. And we have to get our institutions to do something. I was having a conversation with some people about what colleges and universities invest in. So at Rutgers, for instance, the business school and the engineering school have these gorgeous, wonderful new buildings with all kinds of wonderful technology, walls of videos that are in the lobby and, just beautiful things to be in. And then if you look at what is given to the arts and humanities, which is dingy, classrooms that don't yet all have, they're not all smart classrooms, and the staircases are dingy, and the elevators are covered with graffiti and stuff like that because no money is being spent on their facilities. What is a student going to think? A student's going to enjoy going to the business school or going to the engineering school because it's a nice atmosphere, whereas to take the arts and humanities is not something that's very appealing, and certainly not appealing to their parents, of students who look at these things and say, okay, where is my child going to be studying, kind of thing. So I think we have to pressure our institutions to start thinking of values other than money.
Does anybody else have does anybody else want to respond to these questions? Because,
Yeah,
you know,
I'd love to respond. Tell me your
Yeah.
name.
I'm Becky.
Becky. I'd love to respond to Becky's question. I think it's really important to realize that if you think only of the gallery system and you think of yourself as a gallery artist, that there are 30, 40 years of institutional critique that invite us to think differently about what is the role of the gallery, why is art in galleries, is that the only way to make art, is that the only the rise of art fairs, what game do you want to join? And you can do your politics in any number of domains within your career. But it isn't just the feminist thing to say, I'm going to make it as a gallery artist. That's choosing a particular vision of liberal, feminist, capitalist, market-driven, whatever. And I don't mean that critically, but you might choose, I am going to do grants, I'm going to do public art, I'm going to do art where I collaborate with feminist groups like Patricia does. So you have to be strategic in figuring out how you're going to earn your living, realizing that you're going to have to make some compromises there, but you can do your politics in other domains. It doesn't have to be in the gallery system, unless your goal is that you want to be a gallery artist, or you want a teaching job that requires you to have, in my department, to be a studio artist, you have to have a gallery career, pretty much. But we have a whole track of artists who are performance artists, and they have different criteria. We have a whole track of artists that are media artists, and we have different criteria for evaluating them. So that's making change, and that takes it out of the hands of the institutions that are traditionally the standard bearers.
I think there were some more hands that were up.
I wanted to just thank you all, because I'm not usually in a room filled with people who are older. I myself am 68, I just retired from full-time teaching. Yes, thank God. For Sarah Lawrence was the first, and then the Art Institute. But I wanted to say something that I think is really significant, and I cannot solve it, which is, it's such a pleasure to be with an older generation, because what I found is the great disappointment to me has been what's happened. Now, granted, I'm in the media space, I'm in the digital space, which is worse, with the younger women who have actually become the most cutthroat, economically driven, scary Gen X people. I don't know whether it's and everybody's nodding. I mean, I mostly spend my life with these Gen X people to a point where now I can barely stand it. It's so depressing. And I'm not sure why it happened. This has been like a total inspiration. I was ready to cry when I left the house today because I'm working on various projects. I don't know, many things went wrong. Social media obviously is a big player. Value systems, we're in a very conservative time in this country. It's inspiring to listen to you all. You're probably the generation and Ellen, Adrian, that's who I know. Right. You make me feel better. Your impulses and all the stuff you're saying is wonderful. I'm not sure how to fix what's happened. Maybe you know, but thank you for existing. Stay alive. Thank you. I think the most important thing maybe would be integration more between age groups somehow. I can't stand that I'm the only old person out there. I don't know why it's happened. There's tremendous ageism now because of the show businessization of everything, because of social media, right? It's entertainment. But thank you for existing.
It's very nice.
Do any others on the panel want to comment on this? It's an interesting topic that you've got on to.
I don't mean to ask me to talk and,
No, I don't think you.
I wasn't gonna.
I was thinking of that. And yes. And then Natalie.
Yeah, well, let's maybe
Okay.
one more questions and then we'll speak. Yeah, I think there's like more questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay, oh, go ahead, Cynthia, and then Olga.
Okay, so I have a question about the advent of digital media, and I don't mean social media, I mean digital media for creating, because I can speak about my own experience and many other artists of my age, that our lives as traditional painters were much more challenging, and when we got into new media, we were more accepted, and I wonder, especially in the former Soviet Union countries, and I'm not sure if that's been a factor, but if anyone wants to speak to that change of artists becoming digital media artists, new media artists, and how that affects women.
I think overall, like if you think about the introduction of digital media in 1990s and 2000, it's actually opened up different opportunities, at least for people coming from Eastern Europe. Because in some cases you didn't need to ship like a large scale painting or like a sculpture. You can actually, it was easy, you can project like a video work or the interactive work. So yes, in this case it was easier because it was easier to get your message out. But there is still, I think the importance of the 21st century that the digital media became so hybrid. So today, at least in my opinion, because we have in the collection paintings and sculptures and digital media, it's interesting that all these trends are coexistent, and also you can be like a painter and include some of the digital media in your work. So you can actually cross, I mean, you don't have to, like, in old times, it made sense like if you were a painter, you have to stay a painter. But nowadays, you can actually practice in different medias, and the critics go kind of favorably in this point. I'm not sure if it's answered your question. But
So my question is, did that open up more opportunities?
It's opened up. I think it's opened up more opportunities to the artists, especially nowadays when it's a very complex geopolitical situation, extremely complex for many artists living in Eastern Europe. So I think it's really opened up new opportunities
It opens
for them.
it up, but it's the same disparity in price, class,
Yeah, it is. I mean, like
status, and nothing has
it
changed,
is, yeah, but
even to the tiniest degree.
market is a very strange thing.
Right.
I mean, like in my other life, I'm also a professional fine arts appraiser and work with many estates. And I do it on a daily basis, like appraise art and see how the evaluation system works. And it requires like an efforts of not only artists and institutions and galleries, but it requires like a lot of efforts of the whole art community to bring the prices up, or to bring the prices of women artists to not the same level, but to a similar level. Yeah, and it seems like there is a trend now. Like there is a lot of women artists, which are represented by the major galleries. I mean, I know you have to choose, like if you want to be a gallery artist or if you want to practice on your own. But at least there is a major trend now. Like there is a lot of bigger galleries who are representing women artists. So we'll see, but we have to wait at least maybe 10-15 years to see where it will lead us. And actually, like it's an interesting, like if you're thinking about the values of digital art and how digital art, I mean, how artists who are practicing digital media, how they are praised and how they are evaluated. And you will see that female or male artists practicing digital media will be priced on a similar level. So there is no discrepancy there. So maybe that's the way how the market should follow, I don't know.
I have a thought on that, but I'm going to hold my comments because there are the questions. If there's time at the end, I'd like to respond to that. Olga was next, and then Drew, and then
Okay, sorry. Okay, so Olga.
Okay. Hi. First, I wanted to say about how we price female and male, whatever art. Yes, and it's the first question. Maybe should be upper prices go down, not the lower prices go up. You see, because upper prices, everybody knows.
I agree.
You see, everybody knows
I'm
why
glad you said that.
upper prices go up because art became an investment. And a lot of pieces that bought, they would never go out from the vault. They just kept there. Nobody see them, and nobody put it on the wall to enjoy it because nobody even cares what's there.
Yeah.
It's only cares what it's worth. It's what it's. And again, it's again we cannot say about like aesthetic value or something. It's just like mathematical, arithmetical value.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not sure how to even say about it, how to make it understandable for myself first of all. But it's one thing, and we right now confronted with more problems with, for example, digital art. A young person who wants to see something on the wall would just put a screen, and AI will do whatever he or she wants. Yes, so it's many more competition, and not only for women, but it's for traditional art, for traditional media. But I wanted to ask a question to Natalia and Anna. I came today because I know more about what you're doing. I came today, I thought that you are going to talk a little bit more about one of your latest projects on fermentation that you collaborated with, and it's really art science project, collaborated with some Armenian artists. And could you just a little bit, I understand that you cannot make a big presentation again, but a little bit say about this project, because it's extremely interesting how this direction of art and science in biology developing there, and why you collaborated not with some kind of people inside of Russia, but have to go to Armenia.
Well, fermentation was a theme of SciFest, and fermentation wasn't only in the sense of scientific exploration. Fermentation, you can read curatorial text online. It was the wider angle, like for instance, relationship between people. This is also some kind of fermentation. So it was around it. It's not only like art science projects. And so it was theme of SciFest. There were many projects. You can see them on our site with the pictures. It's better. Why Armenia? Because of the war, I had to move the whole team from St. Petersburg to Yerevan. That's the main reason. And in Armenia, we have a wonderful exhibition space. It's like mini Guggenheim, literally. Patricia saw it, and then came this year. So that's why Armenia. That's the only reason. And people actually, I found Armenia we're a warm country in terms of the relationship, and people are interested. I mean, St. Petersburg is more in the north. So, and it reflects because people are interested, but they will never talk openly. And also the face expression is that Armenians are different. They would ask questions, they will talk about it.
Yeah, and passionate.
Yeah, very passionate. They're very interested in digital arts. They want to know how and why.
Yeah.
I like to say that you could feel the spirit of Arshio Gorky.
And thinking about more like scientific level, there is a whole issue devoted to fermentation in the Leonardo journal as well. So when artists and scientists explore the issue, like we equated the issue, but on more like academic level.
Right, yeah, look at the Leonardo. Yeah, there's a whole issue on fermentation. I think Drew, you were next.
Okay, so we talked about gender identity, we talked about orientation and disorientation, and we agree and disagree and can learn from each other and grow. But one thing majority of us will agree that all of these are part of biology. So coming to BioArt, Lisa, and of course, yes. And so, I mean, we know that Ellen has extensive bodies of work in neuroscience, machine learning. Patricia worked herself on several projects in music art and with Victoria West now on Octopus and neurobiology. I'm a cancer researcher and artist myself. Where do you think the field of bioart is moving? And not just talking about AI, but as someone who's an educator starting a program with scripts and things like that, where do you think the field is moving? So someone like me, as a young artist, can learn and strategize.
I'm really glad that you're asking this question about bioart. So I'm working on two ends of the spectrum with Mareta Leah and Nora Vaj. We're trying to do justice to the early history of feminist bioart because we feel that the theorization of it has been very dominant around particular male artists and missing some very important artists who did work around biology but were not thematized as bioartists. So we're trying to question the boundaries put around it early on and address the whole scope of work, including the medical. So my work for many decades was in medicine and art, and the ocean stuff is pretty new for me. And so I've seen many things that don't get included in bioart that I want to see included in bioart. In terms of what's going on with, I never got to Claudine Arendt's work. And I'm sorry about that because that was like the going through the stages of what they did was the whole demo part of it, but I wanted to be able to show the diversity of projects. Jeffrey Stucker, who is part of one of the exhibitions, has just begun a PhD where he's looking at his experience with childhood cancer and the cure that came from a plant that is a very common plant that in Madagascar was used medicinally and then was developed into first a diabetes drug and then a cancer drug. And it saved his life. And now he is a digital artist who does hyperreal 3D simulations. So he's doing a PhD dissertation. So I am continually trying to mentor projects and to speak to you. What do you do next? You have to work with other people because on your own you will sink. And it's so horrible and you need to be on your own and climbing and then you realize that you can find people who do really great things. And as you go up a step, you bring somebody with you and find people at all levels. And I always collaborate intergenerationally. So Jeffrey is part of a network I have that extends from people who are 20 to 86. So collaboration, always working with scientists, but not like, oh, the scientists know everything, but trying to work with the visualization techniques, the sensory techniques, sonification, without kitschifying it. Without getting it into, and now I'm going to put it on the gallery wall because it looks really good and I don't know what I'm talking about. Like you have to know what you're talking about, which is why somebody like Jeffrey Stucker is doing a PhD at, as a mid-career artist who's already collected by museums, is doing a PhD. So I'm really committed to research-based art practice, not to replicate science, but to ask questions about the aesthetics. This beautiful flower, what does that have to do with curing? So I hope that.
Thank you.
Or the aestheticization of cancer.
Exactly. Fetishization and aestheticization.
No, you had a question, you were.
No, she wants to.
No. Please.
So actually what Lisa, what you just said, segues directly into what my question was, which was going to be directed to you about the relationship between border crossing and collaboration. In everything that you do, you talk breakneck speed about, an incredible array of projects that touch on so many issues, and the common theme is constantly that you're collaborating across borders of academia, research institutions, artists practitioners, and marginalized communities. And I guess I'm thinking back to the whole theme of this panel. To what degree can you talk a little bit about how that commitment to collaboration and to crossing borders emanates from your own feminist roots?
Yeah, and thanks Barbara, and I would go, it's kind of a continuation. So one of my students who works in AI, he and I and another colleague made an AI research group that's about autoimmunity. And it's the other AI. And to my horror and delight in researching autoimmunity, what do you find it to be connected to but early artificial intelligence? So we're doing this history of it, we're just doing an AI, and we did a very big paper for this journal, Catalyst, Feminism, Theory, Technoscience, which is an online journal that crosses critical art practice and technoscience, history, and theory. But I think that by working on the social experiences that you have and finding that network of people to do your work in and through that group, it can get you past some of the boundaries of your field, because then you have a need to do something that goes beyond satisfying the imagined terms of your discipline. I mean, there's something bigger to life than your field, obviously.
Nina had a question.
I want to respond to a couple of these things. On this last discussion you just mentioned, some people are not comfortable, especially people from different social stratum and economic stratum. A lot of people are not comfortable, they feel like too embarrassed or shy or inhibited. So, but don't deny the mental, your fantasy collaborations with historical figures and people from all around the world. If you can't get yourself to go out, a lot of people, for example, they're starving, they're hungry, and while they're doing their tasks to support their family, they can collaborate artistically in their minds, mashing those grains and having a whole history of a community developed there from their knowledge of, reading picture books somewhere, little scraps of information. That was one part I just wanted to address. The other thing I was wondering, when you were talking about your work, the overview of your oeuvre, when you were talking about tools like algorithmic tools and understanding, like mathematics in different forms, I kept thinking about when I went to New Delhi and went to Jantar Mantar. Did you ever go to see please look it up. Please, please, please. You will find so much information about the earliest speculations about the sun. It's a huge sculpture garden of from throughout centuries of research. And you actually, when you go to visit, you become part of it, and you walk into all of these sculptures that are communicating different ways of understanding the universe from all across the world at the same time, with the sundials, and it's so extraordinary. You might find that interesting.
Nina, may I translate the word you just said? Jantar Mantar means machine and magic.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic.
Right. And Magica. Yes. Yeah, and it is.
But I think overall, in all our presentation, we have the word collaboration as a basis. We have a master printer and the artist. We have the engineer and the artist, and you have a scientist and the artist. So like, I think what unites us, like all our presentations, the collaboration between the nations and collaboration between the genders and the ages, et cetera, yeah.
I'll just make one comment, short one, and it's actually inspired by Donna Haraway, who was speaking on a Catalyst annual meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And she made an excellent point that women have to do a better job of recognizing one another. And I can tell you that 100% of the problems that I experience in my own academic situation, or 100% of the problems that exist for women, would disappear if women would just support women. And she said, we don't reference one another enough in our writing. We are referencing those men. When we give to other women, we're not getting credit for that giving. We don't get reciprocity from those women. And this is sort of, this really resonated with me. And I thought that there was a tremendous amount of truth to her comment about that we need to do a better job of supporting one another.
Thank you. You get it by doing it.
Yeah.
And you're like, your focus is doing that.
Yeah.
And anyone who's reading your work, it's gonna go click, 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 and they're gonna start, it's
when you
it's
write
like
the
fungus,
article,
it spreads, but a good fungus.
Yeah, a good fungus. We should be the good fungus.
There's good
yeah.
guy.
Yeah. And I think all of you have. I mean, I think you all are like just incredible examples of women and women identified as women who are supporting other women. And this is really something that we need to do more of. I'm surprised that we're at this place in our time that it's 2023 and that we still have these issues. So anyway.
Well, it's generational. Yep, it is generational, and I think the original feminist generation, just like what you were saying, this kind of humanistic idea or ideal that somehow got lost.
Yep.
And that's what you have to offer.
Yeah.
Patricia, what you said is just nailing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think
I share your shock, and I just heard your comment. I share I never thought that I would be 64 years old, and it's worse.
It's worse.
It's worse now.
It's worse now. It's completely worse
It's so
now.
much worse now. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Becky, la. I'm not protecting you from this, but it's stunning to me. I can't believe it either.
But the good thing about getting older is,
I'd also like to make a comment.
It's getting worse.
A short one. But there are people here in our midst who were coming frequently. But I want to single out Linda Weintraub, who's now living upstate, because her practice has really echoed, all of this. I mean, in terms of not just for women, but for really empowering artists of great diversity. And I just think, and there's so many people, really, all the faces here, everybody here is really supportive. And we really appreciate that.
Maybe there's one more little point to add to a wonderful discussion. Thank you all for your contributions. I've sat here thinking I have a lot to learn yet. But the joy of doing what you do, the enrichment and the excitement of your creative process, I can only imagine, yes. Can you talk a little bit about getting inside your motives and your rewards for doing the kind of work you do?
I couldn't quite hear.
The question was, the comment was that there's a lot of rewards that you all must be getting, and to elaborate briefly.
Well, let me address that and then come back to Claudia's comment too. So we just were hitting on one of the rewards, which is to see the people that one has trained or that one has worked with and see them spread out, and see a network developing of people who are promoting the ideas of collaboration, the ideas of self-fulfillment for everyone rather than just for an elite few. And when you see this spread out, I think that's a tremendous gratification. The other thing I just wanted to say, since that I've been thinking about, is I have to come back to the idea of values. And when you think about the values that have been expressed by us, but also by all of you, the values of community, the values of collaboration, the values of thinking about equality. And so these are wonderful values, but I don't think they are being transmitted these days. I think artists have a responsibility to transmit them. And I think it's important to have groups, meeting and to be able to talk with groups, because then it begins to spread out, more and more, because it's not happening in our educational systems, to go back to what you were saying, Marjorie. And there's no humanities courses, no one's thinking about philosophy, but artists. Here we are thinking about, collaborating with scientists, which brings a quality to the science as well. It brings a value to the science that perhaps some of the scientists have not thought about, and vice versa, of course. And then, we think about the world and about expanding knowledge. I mean, these are all tremendous values that would be wonderful if more people would think of it in those particular ways. And so, we have an obligation to spread the word as much as we can. And I do think it happens, we really have to pressure our institutions, our educational institutions, not to think in terms of careers and think in terms of, how much the students are going to make, rather than thinking of what kind of values they get. And I don't think they're thinking about those things today. Unfortunately.
Not with tuition being $46,000 a year.
Well, in my school, it's more like $250,000, right? 150 for 2 years, right?
Yeah, well,
$250,000.
yeah, that's just tuition. That's not living or materials or anything. So as we've gone to this, we don't articulate the value proposition for the arts or philosophy or literature or music. Everything is about being instrumentalized. How can we instrumentalize art to justify its existence in this academy? This is what the conversation has turned to. There's no leadership.
That's right.
There is no leadership on this front.
That's right.
Absolutely none. And by the way, Becky is a double major in philosophy. Yes. Go ahead. We have to wind down.
Well, I have been collaborating with philosophers in the US and in Korea, and I've been creating a visual experience of their arguments and their examples. And while I was studying at Yale for summer school, someone came up to me and said, why are you keep collaborating? Like, you need to be able to stand as your own. Like, you are too little to do that. And no, and I was just so stunned, and just hearing that there's power in collaboration, and that when you collaborate, just like what you said, you go up together.
Yeah.
I'm really, it's just wonderful that collaboration has a lot of beauty, and today I was reminded of that beautiful power in collaboration.
She just had a show at Harvard, by the way, in the philosophy department. So, I mean, this is just an example of that mixing, right? And why this can be successful when someone goes out on their own and does this, right? It's amazing.
I'll keep collaborating.
David has the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're gonna have
Last
to go on to-
comments. Okay, all right. Thank you.